Well, we're going to read John 8:32. You all know it by memory, but I'll read this to just kind of get started, and then I've got some other scriptures to read through the message, but let's read this to start with. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. We know that verse by heart, and it's it's one we look to a lot, but it's really more important than I think we think that it is. I want to talk tonight. We're going to stay on the subject of paganism, but we're not really going to talk much about it tonight as much as we're going to talk about what it does, how it slowly destroys the foundation. How is it that these cycles happen where we just go back into the darkness over and over? How does it happen? Well, there's things to say about it. Now, I've said it over and over as we started this stuff that, paganism is a self-serving religion. If you don't know Christ in reality, and you're not born again of the Spirit of God, in truth, then your religion, whatever you have, will be self-serving. It's about you, not about God. You don't live by principles. Life is not guided by objective principles and truth. Your life is guided by your feelings and your desires and what you want, what pleases you, and what you think, and what makes you happy. That's what your life is guided by. And the Bible makes it plain that is walking after the flesh. So there's only two ways. You walk after the flesh or you walk after the Spirit. One's God and one is everything else. Just because you reject God don't mean you won't be religious. But you just won't have no morals. Your morals will be awful loose. They'll just be up to you. Your morals will be guided by what's best for you. That's how you'll determine your morals. And see, the big difference, and I want to try to stress that tonight, is that if you really believe in God, and you trust God, and you have saving faith in God, then your life is going to be guided by the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. That is a process there. That's not it's something that happens from knowing the truth and obeying the truth and living by the truth. It's lordship. He's the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He's your King. He's your Master. He's your Lord. He's who you obey. He's who you look to for guidance, for instruction in righteousness, for how to navigate through life without being lost. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And one of the great failings of the churches and the preachers in our time, in my opinion, is that few of them seem to have any understanding of the times that we live in. I just really believe that's true. I know a lot of them, and they're caught up in their denomination. I know some that's BF, that's just everything's, if you, and I'm a Baptist or whatever, I'm Baptist born, Baptist bred. When I'm dead, I'll be Baptist dead. That kind of thing. They're loyal to a cause. They're loyal to a creed. They're all caught up in things that the Bible instructs us that are things that shouldn't. There's a higher plane to live on and to look to. Few take into account the fact that humanity as a whole is somewhat like a big organism that changes altogether with time. Are you following me? Humanity is like a big organism that changes with time.
Yes, sir.
People, this human, a collective human mind, like we talked about AI, that they're training AI with, it changes with time. That's why we go into darkness. There's light and there's awakening and there's righteousness, and there's law and order, and then we go right back into the darkness as people abandon that for this other thing of walking after the flesh and doing as they please and turning God into their servant instead of being them a servant to God. These changes are moral and they're intellectual, and then they're manifested in behavior and attitudes and values and beliefs. And again, humanity's all together in that. We all go down the tubes together. We either all rise together or we all go down into the darkness together. That's the way it is. People just follow other people. It's like cattle or like sheep. People follow people. If you don't believe that, just get on the highway and drive for a while and see what happens. How that works. The only exception to that is God's remnant in every generation that remained faithful to God and to truth and to sanity. But there are always very, very few. Now, public opinion changes according to the influences that are strategically controlled by the powers of darkness. In 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 24 through 26, the Bible says this, "And the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient, in meekness instructing those that oppose themselves, if God peradventure will give them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth, and that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who are taken captive by him at his will." Public opinion changes according to the influences that are strategically controlled by the power of darkness. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The devil he is working this intelligently. And he changes public opinion. And he can do it. He knows the points that he must have. He knows the high places. He knows where the speakers are at that he must work through. That's something that happens very slowly, changing of public opinion. You can't change it overnight. It has to happen slowly. And it goes unnoticed until people are shocked by some law or some judgment by the Supreme Court that makes immorality the law of the land. And then we say, what has happened to our country? What has happened to our people, our churches? How in the world could this be? Well, you wasn't watching. You wasn't paying attention. Were you supposed to be paying attention? I've wondered many times where everybody was at in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Where was everybody? Where were they? Wasn't they paying attention? It should have stood out. Now, I know there were some. I read like Tozier. He died in 63, I think, and he saw it. There were a lot of others who said it, who spoke out, but nobody listened. They were just shoved aside because they were going against the flow of things. And the tendency of everybody is just to go with the flow. Yes. That's why it's like it is in the churches. I noticed something the other day. I seen the Beatles wore suits and ties. Yes. Now preachers won't. Yep. They don't think it's necessary. And they think they're right. They think that they have learned more than people ever did know. They know now what have they done? They've been caught up in all of this thing of just, why won't they? Well, because it's more comfortable. They just like it better. All the reasons for doing it, the world still knows it. The politicians still do it. The newscasters and everybody else, they still do it. Anybody that is serious about accomplishing whatever influence they're doing, they still wear their suits and ties. But preachers, they wear their ratty old jeans and t-shirts and dress like homeless people, and it's irreverent, it's disrespectful, it's ungodly. But it's okay now because they've decided that it's okay. I've seen many more. All of the entertainers back then wore suits and ties. Willie Nelson wore a suit and tie whenever he got up to sing or did anything. Everybody that was on any show when I was a kid wore a suit and tie. It was what you did. It showed respect. It speaks of authority. Sure does. Makes a difference. But that was just an example. There's something that happens. This happens very slowly. It goes unnoticed. And people don't notice it until there's some big thing happens to shock them. Everyone's been at ease in Zion for way too long. If you read in Amos chapter 6, if you'll read those first verses in that chapter, it talks about that. Woe unto them that are at ease in Zion. And then it tells all about them. It just describes our society to a T. They're eating sheep out of the flock. They're just laying around. The life of ease. They're proud. Everything's wonderful. And they're at ease. Nothing's ever going to happen to them. We're secure. Woe unto you. And then he proclaims what's fixing to happen to them. And it applies to every generation that's like that. It cycles. It goes through that. You get to that point and you end up being destroyed. The older generation's been longing for the days when they were at ease in Zion. When they had revivals and meetings and big days and people would come to church and church was church. They longed for the good old days when it was like that. But those days were not the standard for truth and righteousness and for the work of God. Those days were not the standard. They look back on it with nostalgia and a longing for times when they enjoyed themselves and when things were easier, they thought. Really, when they were back there, it wasn't so much easier. Those were the days that ushered in this new paganism. That was the generation that did it. Or those were the generations that did it. They ushered in. They laid the groundwork. They prepared us for what we got now. By compromising and by not standing for the truth. You say, well, I did stand for the truth. No, they didn't. There was a very handful of people that I know from those days and have known from those days that stood their ground and didn't compromise on issues of real importance. You know, people don't think that these matters matter. You know, how you dress. You know, this is what I was talking about the manner you come to church. Everybody used to go to church dressed up. That is a fact. You can't argue with it. I mean, it is absolutely the truth. Nobody came to church dressed down. They dressed up to go to church because it was God's house. There was reverence for God Almighty and His holiness. It was not, He wasn't their good old buddy or their big daddy or the old man upstairs or their cool dude or their waymaker or their helper or any of that junk. He was God. And it showed in their actions and beliefs. And they dropped all that. They dropped it. They compromised with their music, with their dress, with all of their standards. They dropped them all. In my time as a Christian, they've dropped them all and left them all. And you said, don't matter. That's what I'm preaching to you tonight. It does matter. They did it. While they were having singings and camp meetings, the devil was taking all the high places in the schools, the colleges, the governments, the courts, the entertainment, the music, and the churches. The devil took them while they're shouting her out and running the aisles and going from meeting to meeting, having such a wonderful time. And while they're out there leading hundreds of people to the Lord on the streets and whatever, none of them ever coming to church. And then bragging about what a great work of God they're doing. You know, they gloried in their great works for God, which amounted to zero when it comes to the fact of the matter. A lot of them's gone. I mean, completely gone. There were such great works for God. They don't even exist anymore. That wasn't the work of God. Many started Christian schools, but soon followed the pattern of the world in their curriculum and their sports, and now most of them are completely conformed to the world, and only preparing their students to go to colleges where they can be indoctrinated into devilish philosophies of the ungodly, woke, perverted, socialist world around us. And that's a fact. You know, I remember when I first got saved and got in church, and when I was preaching early on, man, it was, no Christian school wanted to be accredited. But now you do. That's the thing. It was the state. It was the state approving you, licensing you. But now nobody wants to have anything to do with any Christian school that's not accredited because their kids can't go to college. Well, why don't you just skip it in the first place? Why you want to send them to Christian school for 12 years and then send them to a college with a bunch of atheists and sodomites to teach them? What in the world? And most of the Christian schools have went by the wayside anyway, after they destroyed the churches. The focus and efforts of most ministries are completely missing the spiritual warfare that's been going on since sin entered into the world. They're disengaged in the conflict, and they've come to believe that religion is like booze to the drinking crowd. That's what they think religion is. It's just a means to forget about everything and be happy for the weekend. Yeah. They go and have their spiritual high from their spiritual pimp who works them all up on schedule every Sunday. They have their emotional fix and then they're good for another few days. I guess. The battle is lost. You hearing me? The battle's lost. And there is no hope for anything in the future except the judgment of God and the destruction of this country and life as we know it. Unless there's a true turning back to the truth of Almighty God. And there is a general abandoning of the idols of self and independent personal religion. And custom made by every individual to his own liking. That's got to go. Joshua said to the people, you cannot serve God and these idols. You can't serve God as long as you're holding on to that mess. They said, we will. He said, no, you won't. You got to turn loose of that. New Testament, come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord. All of the things that they talked about and dealt with, the problems early on in the church, it had to do with the things going on in the churches of the Gentiles that were saved out of paganism, and they were in the church, like not eating blood, drinking any blood, not eating things sacrificed to idols. All those were issues. And fornication. Those were things that the pagans did in their religion that had to be dealt with in the church. You got to be different than them. You can't be a Christian. It's very plain in the epistles. You can't belong to God and be a Christian and be participating in all of that stuff. You got to come out from among them. You got to make a clean cut. You can't be a pagan and a Christian. No. You got to be one or the other. Now you got to get in or you got to get out. And getting in means coming out from among them and cut and doing away with all of their immorality, their lack of morals, their philosophies, their ideas about God and religion has to go. Now, everybody knows that this country has changed drastically from what it was when it began. I don't think everybody really understands how drastically. There's no doubt that the prevailing influence in the general population, both morally and intellectually, was the Christian religion and the Bible. People, I've heard them say, this never has been a Christian nation. What a foolish thing to say. There is absolutely no doubt. The record is firmly made, and it's written, and you can still read the quotes and the books and everything from the founders of this nation. And you want to talk about Benjamin Franklin was a deist, and Thomas Jefferson didn't believe, he wasn't a saved man. Read what they said. Both of them, I read it today. And I didn't write it down because there's too much to write down. They said a bunch of stuff. But Benjamin Franklin very clearly said and made it very clear that the only hope of this thing working was that if the people stayed moral and religious according to the doctrines of Christ. And he went on and said that he had doubts about the deity of Christ. But he said, I may be wrong. I've not studied it that much. But he said, I have full confidence in that there's never been a system that'll work to keep people moral and right than this. And Thomas Jefferson said even more than that. But there's no doubt that the prevalent influence in this country then was the Christian religion. Religion meant you was a Christian. Didn't mean you was a sun worshiper or a devil worshiper or any other kind of pagan. The Indians were savages. They were heathen. They were pagan. They were not Christians. That was nothing about the founding of this country included anything but the Bible and Christianity. There is also no doubt that the same influences that prevailed among the people, the population, were also prevailed in the founders of this republic. Those who wrote the founding documents and who were the architects of the new government of this country. They knew that people can't be free if they're not moral. They knew that the morality of the people, the nation depended. The success, the continuation of this nation of freedom depended on people being moral, doing right, living by the law of God. And they said so very plainly. Moral virtue doesn't come from anywhere except from the knowledge and the fear of God Almighty. Not Zeus or Jupiter or Mars or any of the rest of them. Moral virtue only comes from God. Apostate Christianity moral virtue is not a thing with pagan religion. They don't care about moral virtue. That's why the fornication and eating blood and all kinds of things were an issue in the early church, because those people that were in the early church had been pagans all their lives. But it includes all religion outside of Bible-believing Christianity. Moral virtue is not an issue with them. Y'all stand with me. Stand with me. Sin and religion. Religion without righteousness. That's what it is. Apostate Christianity is pagan because of its lack of moral virtue. I believe that. I believe all these churches and all these people who claim to be Christians and they're living like dogs and barnyard animals, I do not believe they're Christians. They are pagans. They may claim Christ, and they may talk about Jesus, and they may go to some place called a church, but they ain't the real deal. That is right. If any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things passed away, behold, all things are become new. Sin shall not have dominion over you. You won't walk after the flesh. You won't live in that realm when you belong to God. That's the difference. And see, the generations before us gave up that ground to the devil. They quit preaching it straight and narrow. You know, we're all sinners. We got this sinful nature and we can't help it. And we're born this way. And so now everybody's just a sinner. And nobody can, you need not expect anything better than that from anybody. And that's the attitude. The devil's pulled all the teeth. He's neutered the gospel in the mouths of all of those false prophets. If I didn't have nothing more than that to preach, I would quit. I'll tell you for sure. But I do have something more than that to preach, because I've read this book. And I still read this book. And every time I read it, it confirms it to me that Jesus saves. Saves from sin. And it's real. And it is the truth. And the truth will make you free. The moral and religious populace, that, you know, they designed the government to encourage religion and moral virtue, but not to interfere with or establish certain churches or denominations. That was the attitude when this country was founded. That government was founded by those men. They designed it with that in mind, that the government was to encourage religion and moral virtue, not oppose it, not tear it down. That's why the Congress allotted money to print so many thousands of Bibles. That's why that the resolutions of Congress were always referred to the Lord God and to the Scripture and different things like that. Always in the early 1800s, all the way up through the 1800s, lots of the acts of Congress referred to God, referred to the Word of God, referred to the Bible in their lawmaking. That a moral and religious populace was key to remaining free was a concern that was put down in writing by more than one of the founding fathers of this country. They understood this most important truth and codified it into the civil law. And they hung all of the hope on it. Until the 20th century, everything that came up through the courts had to do with religion was interpreted by that understanding and foundational truth. And it produced the greatest country, without a doubt, that's ever been on the face of the earth. It did. Now, we used to be a great country. So how did we go from a country and a culture that basically agreed about the vital role of religion and moral virtue and the government's role in promoting it to where we are now? How did it get to where we are now? During the church age, up until less than 100 years ago, the general belief among civilized people was that God and truth were not subjective. Remember what I said when I started here? The change that happens in the collective humanity, the mind of humanity, how it changes slowly. That's what I'm talking about here. Up until less than 100 years ago, the general belief among civilized people was that God and truth were not subjective. Do you understand the difference between subjective and objective? Subjective means you decide, basically. Objective means somebody else decides. That God and truth were absolutes, and that man could know God and find truth through the Word of God with the guidance of the Spirit of God. That was the general belief of everybody that was civilized. Yep. Up until about 100 years ago. God was God. Even archaeology, geology, all were based around the flood that the Bible talked about. That was a major thing that determined about geology and archaeology. They were able to find oil and all kinds of things, reckoning from that perspective. because it's true and right. Now, truth, the mind of the people has been changed. And the populace has been brainwashed over several generations now, ever so slowly, to believe that God and religion and morals are all personal, private things that every person has to figure out himself. Think about it. That's the attitude. I'm not going to be able to make this as clear as I want to make it tonight, but truth is now subjective, and so is the idea of God. Even the concept of God is subjective. It's just whatever you think. You know, truth is your truth, my truth. You have your truth, I have my truth. That's the way you see it. I don't see it that way. And I'm right. You know, we're both right. Everybody can be right and have a different opinion. That's the way that everybody thinks now. Even God himself. Truth can be whatever I feel or want it to be. And that's as good as the next person's ideas. Even God himself is subject to what we want him to be. We can think of him in any way we want, and nobody has a right to tell us we're wrong. It is basically the strategy of Satan since the Garden of Eden to bring God down off his throne and make yourself God in his place. It's such a drastic thing in the basis of how we personally comprehend truth, right and wrong, good and evil, and God himself. And it's bound to have drastic effects on the direction the whole society goes. So that's why that it's sold to individuals first. It's marketed by the devil to the public for their own personal consumption. And you get that first, and then the whole herd is poisoned. And the whole herd starts acting crazy and insane. They've changed the meaning of freedom from what our ancestors knew it was to this new idea of everyone can do anything they want, anytime they want, it to anyone they want, and no one can condemn them, and there will be no consequences. How did we get from freedom to rioters burning down the cities and looting the stores and nobody can do nothing about it? How did we get from there to defund the police? It's the removal of law and order. When you brainwash people to believe this way, it is the removal of law and order. And it happened a long time ago, as it was sold to the public through education, novels, radio, television, movies, and now social media and the internet. It's the removal of law and order. It's the teaching of rebellion. And it's happened in the last 60 years. Mostly. Age of rebellion. Nobody can tell me what to do. Nobody can, it's amazing to me. The slaves were happier in slavery than the employees are now in their jobs. And that is a fact. I've been seeing a lot of historical things, and it's things that they recorded. Somebody sat down with them and wrote down the words, thank the Lord. That somebody had the foresight to do that. A lot of old people that were slaves back in the 30s and even into the 40s, there were some of them still alive. But they sat them down and talked to them and wrote down their story. And it's very interesting. They were happier as slaves than most people are now in their jobs where they were. Well, there was freedom back then. You say, well, the slaves weren't free. I believe they probably had more freedom than we do now. I can't imagine having to work, like Coda working in that place and in Walmart and how it is, and these guys that drive the delivery trucks and these truck drivers and everything. I mean, they might as well have a ball and chain on them. They might as well have somebody behind them with a whip, because they got a GPS that's tracking everything they do. They got to move. They've got to stop when they got to stop. They've got to move when they've got to move. I mean, they're tracked as if somebody's on their back all the time. I can't imagine. You was talking about going to work for the state, and having to take your fob and what do? You when you get in the truck, you got to scan your fob. When you get out of the truck, you got to scan your fob. Get in the truck, you got to fasten your seatbelt. And they're watching you every step of the way, all the time. And if you miss one thing, you lose your job. You're in danger of losing your job. How could it have been any worse for slaves? Well, I'm chasing a rabbit there. But it's the removal of law and order, and it happened a long time ago. Now we're seeing our society come apart, and collapse in upon itself because of this breakdown in law and order. Corporately, all as a whole, not just every man for himself. This removal of law and order from self now is the removal of law and order from our whole society. So, the cop can stop somebody, and they can just mouth off and refuse to cooperate, refuse to get out of the car, and he can't touch them. I've watched videos of a cop screaming and hollering at a guy, and the guy got his rifle out, loaded it, and killed the cop on the video. Well, now, when there's law and order, it don't happen that way. No, the bad guys get shot. The cop has a gun. Why has he got a gun for? If he can't use it. And when a guy's loading a gun and fixing to shoot me, just as soon as he turned around that gun toward me, I'd be shooting back at him. In fact, I'd put him down before, I think. It's only sensible. It's insanity, anything else. But that's where we're at. They can't do it because they got cameras on them, and they're being monitored every move they make and every word they say. And if they make one little bobble, then the bad guy's right and they're wrong. Judgment is turned around backwards, and truth is fallen in the street. There's no equity to be found in the land. Nothing's right. Everything's wrong. No law and order. It's because everybody does what's right in their own eyes. Everybody's got this mind that did not exist in those people that founded this country. They lived in the fear of God. Their lives were guided. Their morals were guided. Their ideas of life and what they spent their life for were guided. It was all guided by God and His commandments. God and His love. God and His law. That's why they pledged their name. What did it say? I've got it written down here later. But anyway, I'll get to it in a minute. Now, it's evolved through the courts to this impossible idea that the government must be absolutely neutral in the matter of religion. Now, the government cannot define what religion is and isn't according to the courts. And there's a number of cases that have come through the Supreme Court through the 1900s up until now that have taken us step by step to this place where the government can't define what religion is. But they do. All it is, it's made it possible for them to do that and to persecute true religion. The 10 Commandments are religious, and therefore they're forbidden. Separation church and state. Can't have church. See, the church, that's religious. Anything to do, they say church, but church is to the government. The prayer to Jesus is religious, and therefore it's forbidden in school and in legislatures, etc. Prayer to Jesus is forbidden because it's religious. I thought the government couldn't decide what was religious, define what was religious. If they can't define what's religious, then they shouldn't outlaw the Ten Commandments. How can they say the Ten Commandments are religious if they can't define what is religious? The Bible is religious, and therefore it's forbidden in schools and in other public places. They used to have a Bible when they'd swear in people in the court as witnesses. Not anymore. They used to swear in people to be president and into public office with their hand on a Bible. Y'all know that, don't you? They don't do that now. Because the Bible is religious. And it can't have anything to do with the government or public. A nativity scene is religious, and therefore it's forbidden on public property. See, ever since the Supreme Court decided that the government, that there is a wall of separation between the government and the church, they've forbidden all the things of the church. That is not what the founders had in mind. It's just exactly the opposite. Satanic clubs at schools and colleges are not religious, and therefore they're protected as rights. They can put a statue of Satan up, and it's protected. You know, the guy that went out there and knocked his head off, he got in big trouble. But, you know, they can do anything else. They can desecrate a cross. They can desecrate a church. They can put a crucifix in a bottle of urine, and that's art. And it's protected. It's Jesus. How come it ain't religious? I mean, how come it ain't religious? You said he's religious, so he's forbidden in church, in schools, and in the government, and in prayer, and all of that, but it's okay. And for the government to fund art that does that with him? Countless things like this prove that everyone, including the government, knows perfectly well that the government will never be neutral on religion. They say the government cannot legislate morality. That used to be a thing that stupid people said. That you can't legislate morality. What a fool. Every law that is made is legislating morality. Every law. It's saying thou shalt not. Or it's saying thou shalt. Every law. Don't y'all understand that? All this process through the courts about separation of church and state has done nothing but weaponize the government against true religion and moral virtue. Exactly what the founders did not mean for the government to ever be. But they warned plainly that if the people of this country did not maintain their religion and moral virtue, this is exactly what would happen. John Adams said, "We have no government armed in power capable of contending in human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other." He said, "Statesmen, my dear sir, may plan and speculate for liberty, but it is religion and morality alone which can establish the principles upon which freedom can securely stand." Y'all listening to that? The only foundation of a free constitution is pure virtue. And if this cannot be inspired into our people in a greater measure than they have it now, they may change their rulers and the forms of government, but they will not obtain a lasting liberty. They will only exchange tyrants and tyrannies. You cannot, therefore, be more pleasantly or usefully employed than in the way of your profession, pulling down the strongholds of Satan. This is not cant, but the real sentiment of my heart. John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the President of the American Bible Society, he said this: "By conveying the Bible to people thus circumstanced, we certainly do them a most interesting kindness. We thereby enable them to learn that man was originally created and placed in a state of happiness, but becoming disobedient was subjected to the degradation and evils which he and his posterity have since experienced. The Bible will also inform them that our gracious Creator has provided for us a Redeemer, in whom all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, that this Redeemer has made atonement for the sins of the whole world, and thereby reconciling the divine justice with the divine mercy has opened a way for our redemption and salvation, and that these inestimable benefits are of the free gift and grace of God, not of our deserving, nor in our power to deserve. That's the way they talked. The men that wrote the Constitution, the men that thought it all out and set up the government so that men could be free, so that their children and their grandchildren could live as free people. And they said it won't last unless you stay faithful to God and you live right according to God. There are endless quotes like that by the men who risked their lives, and they staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on this hope for their posterity. Now we're in a different era and a different world, and we must be awake to the facts as they are now. We're living in a country and a world where ungodliness is the prevailing influence, not godliness. We're living in a different world than they were. And hatred for God and for His book and His people have the reins of our government and every other avenue of information in our society and world. Are you listening to me? Yes. Ungodliness, the devil, the forces of evil have the reins. They're in all the high places. They're in control of everything that comes into your ears and eyes and lives. All the information that comes to you, except what you get in the house of God and from your own Bible. Everything else is poisoned and influenced by them. Now the danger to your soul and the souls of your children and grandchildren is that you will not be diligent to guard your heart and your mind and your spirit in such an environment. You won't keep your guard up. That's the danger. I mean, the real danger. No wonder Jesus said, watch in the last days. Watch. Watch and pray. Don't let anybody deceive you. They're going to deceive you. If it were possible, even the very elect are going to be deceived. It's going to be bad. It's going to be deception like the world has never known. And here we are. That's where we're at. And that's what I'm warning you about tonight. Everybody listens. Everybody's drinking full cup of everything that's out there. It's coming into our minds continually. And here's the danger. You're not going to guard your heart. You're going to leave a breach somewhere. And you're going to be swept down the river with all the rest of them in this change. This change that we've talked about, but it's still happening. We're in another phase of it where the whole human race is fixing to go down a path that never been before. Mentally, intellectually, spiritually. I'm watching as people that I've known for a lifetime are being sucked into the vortex of this end time deceit and delusion and self-made religion and self-determined righteousness. I wish you could know some of the people and know what I've heard them say, what I've heard them and saw them stand for or say they stood for, and then what I've seen them do. And what I'm seeing them do right now. Compromise, apostatize, give up everything to the devil. It's very disturbing to me. It happens slowly. It's like a snake swallowing its prey. You know how he does it, don't you? He waits until the little creature takes a breath. When you let out your breath, he grabs another bite. You just relax for a moment. Just give in just a little bit. Just make it easier on yourself a little bit. Compromise a little bit. Just give up some more ground to the devil. Take a step back. So, well, I don't see why that matters. I don't see that's important. I just don't see why they got to make such a big deal about that or this or the other or whatever. Just be lazy in your mind and in your spirit. And just quit resisting. Quit fighting for just a little bit. See what happens. He'll just grab another big bite of you. I mean, you go deeper into the devil's belly. Into the serpent's belly. How many right here tonight are being slowly drawn into this philosophy of the devil that you just have to find your own way and make up your own mind about what's right and wrong, what's holy and unholy, what's good and evil? Let me ask you a question here. Now let me say this first. God is the rock. Is that right? He is our salvation. I am the Lord thy God. I change not. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. There is none other, and there's no place else to find truth and righteousness, holiness, the knowledge of the holy. There's no place to find it except God. It's not in ourselves. It's not in the wise men of this world. And it's not godless religion that is without morals. You're not going to find it there. Man, I saw the other day, after I preached last week on paganism and aliens, I saw a church around here somewhere in this area. They were on the platform and the kids were up there singing, and they had a spaceman and 2 aliens on the platform of the church with the children singing, doing some kind of whatever they were doing. And the music was awful. Ungodly. And everybody rejoices in it. Everybody's for it. Everybody's liking it. Everybody's saying, yay. You don't think it's a big deal. It is a very, very big deal. I don't know about the churches around here. I know people that go to some of the churches around here. But I'm telling you, that's the kind of stuff that almost all of them are doing. I don't know of any of them that are not. They have that ungodly, worldly music in their churches. They're floating right down the river with all the rest of them. They're oblivious to everything that I'm talking about here tonight. Are you going to be too? I mean, are you going to just be next in line behind them? I mean, are you going to do that? Does the Bible really and truly settle matters for you? Do you really go to the Bible and settle a matter of right and wrong, a moral issue? Do you go there and that settles it? Or do you decide according to your experience and knowledge, or the experience and knowledge of other people, and how you feel about it? And do you assess everything? Do you weigh? Well, that ain't the way our forefathers lived. That ain't the way people lived and believed when men were free. No, they didn't. God was the authority. And you've heard it all your life. I've heard it all my life since I've been a Christian. You know, this is the final authority. And we believe God. And if God said it, that's it. Not even, God said it, I believe it, and that's it. No, cut out the believe. God said it, and that's it, no matter if I believe it or not. But we still decide by how we feel about something. How much it pleases us. What it's going to cost us if we believe that. No, you swallowed. The snake's is swallowing you. Yes. He's already got his teeth in you. and you're going down. You're on your way down. Let me read this to you. Y'all, maybe you know this by heart. Psalm 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor sitteth in the way of sinners, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. Now, blessed is the man that don't do that. That means getting away from him completely. Nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of waters, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. Beware. I'm telling you, beware, lest you get caught in the current and go down the river with all the rest. And beware and know that if you don't come out from among them and be separate, your children and your grandchildren will surely be a part of them, and they will perish with them. You have no idea how much depends on you, and on you standing true to God and what's right, according to this book. Not how you feel, not what you think, not what your friends think, not what your friends are doing. It's a pitiful generation that won't pay the price. I didn't care what it cost me. When I got right with God, it was a settled thing with me. That if everybody abandoned me, that's just the way it's going to be. I was not going to compromise and give it up in order to gain favor or to keep friends or keep family happy. That was an absolute no with me. And I do not understand it when it's not in other people. I just don't believe you got it. If you'll bend, if you'll wilt, if you'll back up and you'll compromise and you'll play the hypocrite, I just don't believe you got the real deal. I really don't. God, when you give your life to God for real, I just believe that He does something for you. He puts some grit in you and some backbone in you to stand. Having done all, stand. Stand! Ain't nobody stood, and that's why we're where we're at. That's why we're here. The compromisers and the faint-hearted have brought all this upon us. If preachers would have preached and been faithful, the Methodist Church wouldn't be what they are, for sure. And we wouldn't be in this awful time that we're facing here. Amen. Well, let's stand. Have a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the truth here tonight about this matter. I pray that you would help us. I pray it'd be understood. I pray it'd make a difference. I pray it'd challenge us and help us all to realize that we got to be careful in the time we're living in. We've already got so much of it in us already. I pray you'd purge us of all this weakness and willingness to compromise, Lord, that's among our people. Lord, I pray for your people. Please help them to stand strong in these last days. Pray for us here. Please help us to be faithful and stand for what's right. Pray everybody would understand. I pray their lives would be guided by your word and the principles of your word, the truths of your word, and not by feelings and desires and the influence of others and the pressure from others. Lord, help us. I pray you give courage and strength and hearts to live for you in these days. Please go with us now. Give us a safe trip home. Pray everybody and make it home safely tonight. Watch over us. Lord, we love you. Thank you for a church in Jesus' name. Amen.